Okay, thanks, Michael. It's great to be back on the stage at SLIF. Now, SLIF is about looking to the future, thinking forward. Brian did a great job with that this morning on his talk on AI. But as we look to the future of senior living, what I'd like to do is take a much wider lens than we're normally afforded in the day-to-day of our industry, in the day-to-day of operations, where you're focused on issues like staffing, like occupancy, like NOI, like the latest request from your capital partner, or whatever it may be. And I want to really widen the lens, because I think if we're going to look to the future, we've got to be able to do that. And in doing that, I want to open and pose two questions to you this morning that I want to chat with you about. The first is, will increased longevity be a boon, a bonus, or a curse for the growing number of older adults in our society? Then the second one, following on that, is, will this growing number of older adults in the US be viewed as society's burden or as key to addressing some of society's biggest challenges? Now, I think the answer to these two actually separate questions depends on what narrative we embrace about aging. And by we, I mean older adults themselves, I mean our industry, and I mean our society at large. Now, I believe, and I want to share with you why this morning, that we desperately need a new narrative about aging. I want to start, though, with a lesson I learned. And this was a lesson learned from teaching classes regularly at a number of universities for 20 plus years now. And for many of these years, I struggled with the students' lack of connection to the issues of aging and ageism, to their inability to see how it connected to their own personal lives. Yes, maybe to a favorite grandparent or parent, but not to their lives. And then I came up with the idea a few years ago of asking each student in my first lecture at the very beginning to write down what age they expected to live to, and share that then with the class. And we go around and we do that. And then I share with them some, really hard-hitting data points on a graph, and showing that as college students, in many cases grad students, they have a 50% chance of living to 100. And then I share the observation that ageism is actually prejudice against our future selves. And I go on to point out that unless they work to change the societal attitudes toward older adults, that they, sitting here at age 20, 22, 24, that they'll be consigned to live the last third of their lives in social, economic, and cultural irrelevance. Well, I don't know if they agree with my assertions, but since I've started that exercise, it's changed the whole nature of discussion in the classes that I teach. Because it's now not the other's problem. It's not the other's issue. It's now an issue they see affects them. It's their issue. It's their future. A totally different perspective. And it's led to some great discussions. Now, the main reason why we desperately need a new narrative and new messaging about aging is quite simply because the old one, which is the current one, isn't working. It's not working. And continuing to cling to it, I believe, and this is the futurist in me, I guess, will lead to increased longevity being a burden, both for most older adults and for our society. So four ways in which the old narrative, the narrative of today, does not work today. First, it doesn't speak to the realities of age and aging in 2025. Second, it doesn't speak to the desires of boomers, Generation X, and their millennial children. Third, it's rooted in a moral obligation or societal compact framework that's in danger of collapsing. And fourth and last, it doesn't speak to the needs of our society today, but instead only compounds or exacerbates those needs. Now, let me briefly explain what I mean by each of these observations, each of these points. First, the current narrative does not address the realities of age for older adults in 2025. The current narrative is based on a lifespan where most people had one career. They retired in their 50s if they were lucky, or in their 60s, and they die in their 60s or in their 70s. And when they die, when they retire, they hopefully have a few good years left to tick off items on their bucket list before they kick the bucket. And that's life. That's their age span. And if you think about it, today still, 2025, our social insurance programs, our networks of support for older adults, our economy, and our social expectations, and even our greeting cards are all framed around this view of aging and of life. This is heading us for a train wreck. And it's heading also our industry. And I'll say more about that at the close of my talk, but heading us for some real challenges. So, if that's the reality of the current notion of aging and view of aging, how does that contrast to, well, today, many older adults are living into their 80s, 90s, and beyond. As a state legislator, I used to give special notes and commendations to every one of my constituents that reach 100. I was recently visiting with my successor, and I was in the legislature back in the 1980s. And she looked at me almost with disbelief. She said, if I made a personal call to everybody in my district that turned 100, I'd do nothing but doing that. Life's changed. But since we're still stuck with this old notion of aging, what happens? What happens is what Laura Carstensen has described. Because we haven't changed at all our views and our perceptions of aging, we've simply tacked on all these additional years of life to what we call old age. So old age now starts in your 60s and continues on and on and on. And all of it associated with you're in the final phase of life. It's like this interminable period to check off items on your bucket list because it seems you're not going to be kicking the bucket for a long time. But oh yes, you won't actually be able to kick because you'll be so immobilized that you can't kick anymore. So somebody else, you will pay them to push the bucket over for you. Now, sorry about that. That may have been not a friendly example. So, what this means is we, older adults, and our society are unprepared for increased longevity. But once we adjust the narrative to the reality that many will live, as my friend Joe Coughlin likes to say, another 8,000 days from age 66 to age 88, then the important question becomes, what's next? Not, gee, I'm done. Where's my bucket list? How many good years do I have? before I'm going to be incapacitated? And can I afford those years? So this narrative is what I call a next stage narrative. And it makes what senior living should be as a next stage setting, not an end stage setting. Think about it this way. There are now many projections, as I was Googling this and even preparing for this, that by 2040, the average age of someone moving in to an assisted living building will be in the early 90s, in their early 90s. Well, let's take a step back. Okay, so from 65 to 90, that's a quarter of a century, folks. That's 25 years. Yes, we're aging. Everybody's aging. But this is a whole new stage of life. And yet, as a country, our attitude towards aging is turn 65 and it's all downhill from here. In fact, Hallmark cards used to be. There's now a group, and I'm proud to say that one of my family members was part of it, that has lobbied against Hallmark to change all their ageist cards. You know, it's all downhill from 40. You know, the birthday cards at 40 have black balloons and black crepe and so forth. So, okay. So we have this new stage of life. A friend of mine put it this way. When he turned 60, he announced that he was leaving middle age, 40 to 60, and he was now proudly entering prime age. Not middle age, prime age, which he defined as 60 to 80. I'm still in prime age, so they still let me get up here on this platform, for which I am thankful. I'm aging out, but anyway. But this is what Chip Connolly is going to be talking to us about later today at Modern Elder Academy. What do you do with this new stage of life? We haven't adjusted to this at all in our industry yet. We're still stuck, for the most part, in this old concept of age and aging. It's what Mark Freeman at the Experienced Leaders Initiative at Yale, or different similar programs at Stanford, at Harvard, at Notre Dame, and so forth. They're all springing up for people, you know, what am I going to do next? We have an enormous opportunity to be seen as a partner and a collaborator in that, with folks long before, if you're an assisted living provider, a memory care provider, an independent living provider, long before they need our care and our supportive services. Now, the old narrative also fails to address the realities of aging in 2025. So the realities of age, now the realities of aging. Aging is no longer an inexorable, inevitable period of decline starting at age 60, defined by deficits and checking off what you're losing each day. And so your life is defined by a downward decline, and we're even really good at this industry at measuring that for you. We'll show you exactly, in terms of activities of daily living, what you've lost, what you can't do anymore. And because we so focus on that, we're implicitly saying that's your identity, what you've lost, what you can no longer do, your deficits. Wrong question, wrong reinforcement. So, I don't have any passion about these issues. You'll have to forgive me. I know it's still fairly early. I think Michael thought at 8 o'clock in the morning, where he's had me speak before, I'd be a bit much, so he gave you a couple hours. All right, so, but what's the reality is that every day we're learning more about the science of healthy longevity. My wife and I just last week spent several days working with a team of experts to develop our own individualized, personalized, healthy longevity plans. Why? Because it's our purpose and their purpose that we would be able to make a plan for how we could continue to enjoy the things that give us purpose, meaning, and satisfaction, and how we can also adjust our lifestyle to be able to continue to enjoy those things, and the changes that we need to make and are making. So the old narrative then, it doesn't address the realities of age. It doesn't address the realities of aging. It also doesn't address the desires of boomers, Generation X, and their millennial children. Boomers, Generation X, they fear increased longevity, even more so. Any of you read the recent lengthy article in, I think it was Atlantic Magazine, but about a millennial talking about why, no, it was a Gen Z, about why the generation is scared to have kids, and why they were so scared to have kids, and the toll of having kids and the fear of bringing kids into the world. Well, in the same way, boomers, Gen Xers fear increased longevity if it just means surviving. They don't want to just survive, they want to thrive. They don't want more years added to their life unless there's life in those years. Unless there's life, meaning, purpose to those extra years. Ken Dykewald has put it this way: they're more concerned with being useful than youthful. In other words, they want to be viewed as assets in people's lives, assets in society, not as a net negative, a net drain, a net liability. But we've actually furthered this negative view, unwittingly, not intentionally, but we have. And a key to all these desires, let me say, is by boomers and Generation X, is they want their health span as nearly as possible to match their lifespan. So, specifically, aging services, senior living, as I said, we've unintentionally reinforced the old narrative and ageist view of older adults as helpless and dependent, because we've promised to do everything for them and to them, and left little room for what is done by and with older adults. Part of it's our society, part of it's legal. So for instance, we are doing them a service by removing all risk in their lives. Well, folks, that ain't living. That doesn't lead. I mean, we just heard a wonderful talk early this morning from Brian. Did Brian say success, meaning, purpose, fulfillment comes from taking absolutely no risk and just doing what you've done before? While you progressively lose each day, you have more deficits and more inability to do those things? I don't think that's what was his message this morning. So we've promised, in a sense, so much that we've reinforced that sense of helpless and dependable and dependent. Language such as continuum of care, as technically accurate as it may be, only reinforces the sense of learned helplessness and the perception that what we do is manage decline rather than promote engagement, connection, and purpose. Changing the narrative is key to offering a setting that drives healthy longevity, because achieving healthy longevity is built on behavior change. And behavior change won't happen with people that have been convinced they're helpless and they're totally dependent. Their life is paying others to do things they can no longer do for themselves. So, the current narrative and messaging about aging is also rooted in a model, in a moral obligation or societal compact framework that's collapsing, in danger of collapsing. What do I mean? A societal compact in this case is the belief that a moral society takes care of its most vulnerable, including its elderly. We see this lived out by religious and charitable not-for-profits who led the way in providing care for widows and orphans in this country. We see it for decades now in the skilled nursing sector, in their confidence that the government would never abandon funding for the people in skilled nursing communities. But, a big but, in a limited resource society, we're moving increasingly into more of a utilitarian ethic, in which case a narrative that presents seniors as just a problem for others, for society, for the government, a problem to be fixed that requires dollars, that requires government dollars, is likely to lead aging services into a trap where needy older adults will have to get in line with many other groups and many other social needs. And guess what? We're likely, because of this view of aging, burden, liability, we're liable to be near the end of the line. Finally, the current narrative about aging does not address the needs of our society today, but instead only intensifies and only exacerbates them. So, consider the contrast. Now with a new perspective on older adults and this new stage of life and a new narrative on aging, where rather than older adults being society's burden and net takers versus givers and contributors, older adults are a vital asset and a key part of the solutions to many of the toughest challenges our society currently faces. To illustrate this, let me just mention a few things, a few areas. Workforce. Older adults 55 to 85 are the largest untapped workforce in America today. And their importance is escalating enormously in a time of rapidly decreased immigration and rapidly increased deportation. And as we heard this morning from Brian, the issue isn't just all technology and AI and replacing everybody. We're a high-touch personal care. Do we need to do it more efficiently? Absolutely. But we won't do it without people. We need people. You don't feel a sense of human connectedness and purpose from an AI voice speaking to you. You feel it from human touch. By the way, I'll make a plug for Familiar Touch, a great film that's going to premiere in New York City in just a few weeks and then come around across the country. A second area besides workforce, volunteerism. The social capital created with volunteer contributions by older adults, whether it's mentoring, teaching, and even caregiving, is enormous and is desperately needed by our nation. Third, older adults can be a significant part of the solution to the alarmingly high rates of loneliness among young adults, age 18 to 29, much higher rates than amongst older adults. Fourth, older adults, I think, are a key part of the solution to getting control of escalating healthcare costs by moving from a sick care system where they merely drive volume and care and costs to a well-care system that prioritizes prevention, prediction, and proactive management of chronic conditions. And finally, older adults can play a key role in rebuilding community at the local level in our fractured society. So, in closing, what does all this mean for senior living? Why is this new narrative so essential? The old narrative makes senior living an avoidance setting for our customers because it represents the beginning of the end, loss of purpose and of independent agency. But our future residents, as we've seen, aspire to healthy longevity, to a setting that will help put new life in their years and offer the possibility of additional thrive years for them. We are ideally positioned to take advantage of this, to offer a more aspirational setting. But certain key things, certain buts. One, We can't wait to engage with this new customer until they're in their 90s and need our services. We've got to establish the connection, the brand with them long before they move in. What is that connection or brand? It's around that we're their partner, not doing it for them. We're their partner in aging well. Longevity is too big a word, in aging well. And we've got to demonstrate, whether it's opening up things happening in our buildings to them, whether it's going out into the community, we're their partner in aging well. So that when they need the care, it's a natural extension to move into our setting, because they believe we are seriously committed to all the things I've just talked about. Secondly, achieving healthy longevity requires behavior change. And that won't happen in settings that reinforce dependency and learned helplessness. Behavior change means empowering older adults to believe, I can do this. I am capable. Again, we're well positioned. We're well situated to enable this, but it requires changing the expectations of residents and staff from we do everything for you and to you, to we support you and we enable you to be all you can be and do all you can do. Now, we do this not because we're naive or insensitive to your limitations of mobility or cognition, but because we don't think that they define you or prevent you from accomplishing something significant for you and for others. By realizing, yes, I can, even in the smallest of accomplishments, an older adult who's lost hope of contributing to others suddenly realizes they can make a difference. They can be a plus, not only in their own life, but also in the lives of others. They can begin to see themselves again as assets, no matter what their age, what their frailty, what their mobility, not what their cognition level, and not a liability. So I want to finish by observing that aging poorly is an individual sport. It's a loner activity. Aging well, however, is a team sport. Again, what an opportunity for us, senior living communities. But it's an opportunity where we need to build the teams of residents and staff, the connected, engaged communities that will enable our residents to age well with purpose, meaning, and connection, to experience increased longevity as a bonus, as a boon. Then we will indeed be an aspirational setting and will truly excite and delight our customers. Thank you very much.